Hey y'all, this is episode number 33 and my second conversation with an interesting person. Today I'm talking to Keagan Wernicke. He's an entrepreneur and one of the co-founders of the Freedom in Tech Alliance. So we had a lot of interesting topics that we get into, mostly in the tech sphere, talking about stuff like that. But of course, this is the Sovereign Individual podcast, so we get into a bit of politics as well. If you are in the Austin area and you want to get your TV mounted on the wall or your sound system upgraded or anything going on with your entertainment system, check out Bat City TV. Let them know the Sovereign Individual podcast sent you and they'll hook it up with a discount. And thank you once again to Flavor Aid for creating the intro music you're about to hear. Their EP All My Life is available on Spotify and wherever you listen to music, so please check that out and please enjoy this conversation with an interesting person. What's up, y'all? This is the Sovereign Individual Podcast, and today we are doing another conversation with an interesting person. So my guest today is Keagan Wernicke. He is the co-founder of the Freedom in Tech Alliance. He's an entrepreneur who's been in the tech industry for 5 years now. He's sold a company a few years back, started a marketing agency, and then works with FIDA as his nonprofit. So welcome, Keagan. Glad to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
So let's talk about FIDA a little bit, and that's kind of how we got to know each other through some of the events that y'all put on. So if you want to just kind of go over the creation of that, how it started, where it came from.
Sure. So we founded FIDA last year, I think in late November. And the goal at the time was really to just create a network of people in the tech industry that had more conservative or libertarian leanings. Since then, we've kind of evolved a little bit in that we want to try to be a platform and try to be that network as well for people to learn about the big issues in the tech industry that we have stances on. And just to give you an idea of what those stances are, the Freedom in Tech Alliance is basically about encouraging two big things. The first one is economic freedom within the technology industry. So preventing attacks on internet freedom, freedom within the technology industry, which we can get into in a little bit. But some two really prominent ones have been that net neutrality debacle, trying to get enforced net neutrality. And more recently, I think the Hawley Act is a good example of government overreach within the tech industry. So we are against government overreach within the tech industry from ideas that come from both the left and the right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the second big thing that we really stand for right now is the encouragement of First Amendment principles within the technology industry.
Okay.
So we chose that. I choose that wording very carefully because the First Amendment doesn't apply to private institutions. It applies to the law and the government. But we think that it's important to have those First Amendment principles within the tech community so that the tech community, the people who lead the tech companies, don't feel the need to censor and kind of cherry pick the ideas that they're comfortable with and censor the ones that they're not.
So kind of more in like good faith acting within the First Amendment, but not having government intervention to force it.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah, the net neutrality thing is funny because it's here we are. The internet's still around. Isn't that crazy?
Around. Yeah. So it's funny because people were acting like the internet didn't exist before 2015,
right?
When the Obama administration put net neutrality in place. And once the Trump administration and the FCC under Ajit Pai started to try to roll back net neutrality, people were acting like the internet's going to disappear overnight if this gets through. It's going to be the end of the internet as we know it. Really, I mean, I remember the internet before 2015. It's virtually the same as it is now. And 2 years later, net neutrality's gone. The internet's still here.
Yeah, exactly. It hasn't changed
at all.
Which was funny too when that was all going down is it's always interesting when you see like the biggest tech corporations are in support of it, it should kind of like, I don't know, give the layman an idea of how important it may or may not be and what's really going on there.
Yeah, so it was very interesting how everyone in tech got behind the idea of enforced net neutrality. They made a very libertarian argument almost. The argument was that you gotta support enforced net neutrality, otherwise the internet's not going to be free and equal and open. But what it really was a big push by all the big tech companies that would have benefited from legislation like that, like Google, like Netflix, all those big companies that want all the players to be on an equal level and would benefit from them, would benefit from that always being the status quo. It was always basically the status quo. We don't see any discrimination of traffic really at all in the current internet landscape. And the reason why you saw companies like Google pushing for it was that they wanted to always make sure the internet was how they envisioned it, because that could maximize their own profits. I think it's a very dangerous precedent for those companies to take, and it's really kind of short-term minded even, because I think that opens up just a slew of regulations for the government to come in and regulate the internet. So one very important technicality within the issue of net neutrality is that it actually classified the internet as a Title II communication rather than a Title III communication. And the distinction there is that Title II communication technologies are subject to FCC regulations, while Title III isn't. So the most important reason why it was so important for liberty lovers to win that battle is not exactly the topic of net neutrality itself, but that keeping that legislation out meant that it shut down a bunch of other possible regulations that the FCC could have done.
Okay. Yeah. No. And I mean, there's a lot with net neutrality that was very interesting, and it was kind of funny seeing a libertarian type argument made. Part of it too, at least for me, it feels like there should be some discrimination in internet use. Like I don't think I should be subsidizing gamers and the amount of bandwidth they're using, because I'm just basically streaming and doing my podcast. Like I don't need a whole lot of bandwidth to do what I do when using the internet.
Right.
So it just, to me, I'm like, well, it opens the opportunity for ISPs to pop up to gear specifically towards gamers and have ISPs designed for, specifically what you're doing.
Exactly.
Yeah. So big fan of that going away. And again, internet's still here, which has been amazing.
The thing is that even though the net neutrality, enforced net neutrality has been repealed, since the dawn of the internet, really, it's been kind of untenable for people to discriminate against traffic based on like just the values that American culture has when it comes to the internet. So now that we see it's been repealed, there still hasn't been any discrimination. Yeah,
there really hasn't, which again is kind of disappointing, because like I said, I think there's avenues in which we could have, what you're truly looking for. Same with like cell phones. Like not everybody needs to be on a family plan or whatever. You can kind of get whatever suits best for you. And I do like the fact, I mean, in a lot of ways, the internet's still kind of the wild, wild west in some regard.
I think the fear that a lot of technologists had was that, let's say you're a small blog, like a mom and pop blog, in the standard service package under the internet without net neutrality, you might get your bandwidth kind of bottlenecked and not have your sites load fast, stuff like that.
I remember that argument, and so is that kind of not really
what doesn't happen.
Okay. And I mean, it hasn't seemed to happen at all.
And if this the moment an ISP does it, you can be sure that they're going to get mobbed. So that's the free market at force.
And that's the other thing too, and that's conversations I would have with people, because again, it was a very coordinated effort, both by the corporate media
Right.
and the tech giants, Facebook and all. I remember people changing their profile pictures and all that stuff.
Right.
Talk about net neutrality. So it was a very smart marketing campaign on their part. But I remember talking with people during that time and saying, they're going, well, it's going to be bad for smaller people, and then my response was like, nah, it's going to be awesome, because it's going to open up the marketplace for allow more internet service providers to enter the game if they want to.
Right.
It's all. I mean, how much does Time Warner control now? It's an insane amount.
Yeah.
So, like, if we can start getting more people in to compete with them.
In general, the more regulations in an industry, the harder it is for new companies to enter. So, any kind of regulation within the space just gives Time Warner Cable a stronger hold.
Well, and then Time Warner is typically the one writing those regulations and making sure that they're pretty much the only one that can meet them. Which is, again, I'm sure we don't have to jump down that rabbit hole. We're pretty much in agreement there.
Right.
So cool. So what else? Has there been anything else cool happening in the space or happening with FIDA recently?
Well, if by cool you mean absolutely terrible, I think there's a lot of things happening within the technology space in regards to the freedom issues. Back when we started FIDA and had our first event, I think you were there, the Bob Metcalf event.
Oh, yeah.
It was kind of still a question that could be considered whether the big tech companies were actively censoring. We saw some things like Project Veritas recording people from Twitter that admits to shadow banning, but I don't think we really understood how big the scale of the issue was until maybe the last couple of months, when there's just been like an explosion of just obviously really terrible, egregious acts by the big tech companies in kind of pushing their ideological values on the public and trying to control the ideas that people get from the media that they consume. Okay,
so like what's an example of one of the bigger ones?
I think the biggest thing has been the leaked Google documents that have surfaced. Are you familiar with all that?
I've heard a bit about it. As far as I know, it was something along the lines of them wanting to influence this upcoming election through their search algorithm, something along those lines.
Yeah. So the big topic that's discussed within the leaked documents, and even corroborated by a couple of the Project Veritas interviews with a couple of Google managers, is this concept of ML fairness, so machine learning fairness. And to really dive into this conversation, I need to explain what ML fairness is. So when you have any kind of program, any kind of machine learning algorithm that runs on AI to make decisions on what gets displayed, or really anything running on an AI platform like self-driving cars, or let's say you have something that scans people and assesses their risk based on machine learning. There's the possibility that certain aspects that you don't want to get measured gets measured in determining the outcome. So to explain that, let me give an example. Let's say that you have a program that scans a bunch of people and then assesses the risk of previous criminal behavior. And it does that by scanning their faces, or say their social media profiles. You run the risk of the AI then assessing traits that we really wouldn't want to be assessed and determining the outcome. So let's say because of statistics, or because of the machine, the program's data set that it was given, it determines that African Americans have a higher risk than Caucasians for committing crime, and then that program then determines African Americans on the platform are a bigger risk. That has been demonstrated to happen in certain machine learning programs. So the idea that Google introduced with these leaked documents is ML fairness, and that the concept of it is it can be good or bad, because I'd say the good is if you have a program that's assessing people's risk, you definitely don't want to factor in race. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So there is course correction that needs to happen occasionally. But the way that Google was taking this doctrine and applying it to their search results seemed to really indicate their ideological bias and their core ideology that kind of runs the show at Google. And the decisions that they were making due to applying that doctrine can certainly be seen to promote left-leaning views and be used to help Trump or try to get Trump to lose the election and get a Democrat in office.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's. Is there any evidence or anything that's come out that they were attempting to do that in 2016 at all? Once he got the nomination?
There has been there's definitely been discussions at Google where people are making comments that the most obvious and the most likely interpretation of those comments is that they are actively trying to get Trump to lose. I don't want to say they are outright because there's always a slight chance that we are misconstruing their words a little bit or misinterpreting.
For sure.
So I try to lean on the conservative end of before I shout out, this is a conspiracy, this is absolutely happening.
Yeah.
But it certainly seems like that. People are making comments within Google, and leaked communications have certainly suggested, they say things along the lines of, we shouldn't allow this to happen again. So the obvious interpretation there is there's some there's some intervention that they're trying to do.
We shouldn't allow. That's a scary message to be hearing from somebody like that.
Yeah. But in terms of how they're applying the ML fairness, for example, let's say they're pushing ideological issues and trying to prime ideas based on search results. So if you go to Google, this is the example that Project Veritas used. If you go to Google and you type "men can have," why don't you do that right now and see what pops up? Go to google.com.
All right, let me do it on my phone real quick. Cause
cool.
The computer's running a little slow. Yeah, because there's another one too that I wanted to hit up. Oh, I actually have to go to Google. I put DuckDuckGo as my default
That's
search.
Smart. I can't quite do that because So the irony here is that I run a digital marketing agency and we're very dependent on Google ads and Facebook ads to bring in the bucks.
That's right.
So I actually did it right now. So I just searched "men can."
Yeah.
The first thing that pops up is men can have babies. Men can get pregnant. Men can have babies now.
Yeah.
Men can think about nothing. Well, that one's really weird.
There's men can have
periods.
babies.
Now type in "woman can."
Okay. Woman can. Woman can vote, woman can fly, woman cancer, woman can do it, woman candidate for president. Yeah, a little bit different.
Right. So,
or this one too. I'm going to put in Hillary Clinton and then just the letter E. And let's see, emoji. Emails PDF. They must have, because emails weren't showing up for a very long time.
Right.
When doing this search. And it's still not really, there's only the one. And that's endorsements, events, and all that kind of stuff.
Right, so if you go to search volume, Project Veritas pointed this out, "men can have babies" isn't the most searched term for the "men can" template. So it seems a lot like they are trying to push their ideology onto the people. They're trying to get everyone to have the idea that, oh yeah, men can have babies.
Well, yeah, and I mean it's kind of like almost a like groupthink or peer pressure type thing. If you're typing that in and it's giving you the impression that that's the most searched thing that anybody typing that has started with, then you start kind of going, all right.
And also that elevates something that I think should be a very small issue. The whole transgender topics. It's not the most pressing thing in our democracy right now. It really elevates that issue and brings it at the forefront of discussion.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, because it is like it's a very tiny, minuscule percentage of the population, and it is like, it's been kind of interesting to see how that's been. And I think as I'm watching the Democratic debates, I just feel more and more like Trump's going to win in a pretty big landslide come 2020 because they're just going so far left, even of what like the majority of their party believes.
Right.
It's just they're all trying to out-left each other. That's why I don't think Biden can get it. I don't think he can go that far left.
Yeah, I mean, I think Biden, out of all the candidates that they have running, is the only one who has a chance at securing the presidency. But I don't think they're going to nominate him.
No, I don't think so. And it is like, I get it. People who speak a lot make mistakes. I mean, Bush said nuclear. Like I can remember that. But it seems like they're very, very frequent with Joe Biden right now, and like his age is definitely going to be called into question.
Yeah, same with Trump, but I guess I don't know. He makes a ton of gaffes, but it may also be due to the frequency that he's talking. He is on air more than Biden, for instance. But
and I think Trump. I mean, because he's not a politician,
right?
So I really think. Whereas a lot of politicians, especially one like Biden, who's been in it forever, kind of thinks about what they're saying. I think Trump is just. If it comes into his head, it's coming out of his mouth. Like there's no. The
thing is with Trump too, is that he can get away with anything now because he said so much stuff.
Yeah.
But when it comes to Biden, he's going to get a lot more pressure because he's within that political persona template, and he's going to be held a lot more accountable for what he said. We saw this exemplified with Gary Johnson and the Aleppo incident. People hold. People who are considered politicians a lot more accountable to what they say. Donald Trump has either by genius or by accident developed the persona that no one cares what he says.
Yeah, I think it was Peter Thiel that said it best. It was, during the 2016 election, people who opposed Trump took him literally, not seriously, and people who support Trump take him seriously, but not literally. And I think that's still largely the case with his core base.
Yeah, Peter Thiel maybe should have probably taken a little bit more seriously because he didn't think that Trump even wanted to build a wall, but it seems that now that he's in office, he really does. He
does, absolutely. And it's just, I mean, whatever. I don't foresee it getting built. That's just but that has been fascinating too. It's like he's much harder on the Second Amendment.
Right.
He's not been keeping any of his campaign promises. He hasn't started any new wars. I'll give him that, but he dropped more bombs last year than Obama did in any single one of his years, and Obama had set the record before him. So it's like, there's definitely most of what he kind of campaigned on doesn't seem to be coming to fruition, except maybe like the baddest parts, like the focusing on the border wall, this trade war with China, which is just...
Well, hopefully he gets us out of Afghanistan.
Oh, man. I'm trying not to get my hopes up because he said the same thing about Syria. And then, but it is. They apparently are at the table with the Taliban in Afghanistan discussing a method or a measure to get out of there. So that would be very encouraging to see.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. So again, I'm not going to hold my breath on it, but yeah, he's got an interesting cabinet there with guys like Bolton and Pompeo.
Oh yeah.
So that's kind of been impressive too that we haven't started in any new wars.
I saw this article on I can't recall where it was, but it was from some White House insider reporting on meetings with Bolton, and allegedly Trump just always pokes fun at Bolton in meetings, saying things along the lines of, "Oh well, Bolton, if it were up for you, we'd be at war with like Ireland or something like that." And you just want to go to war with the whole world, don't you?
Oh man, that's
the theory is that he keeps Bolton around because it gives impression to potential enemies that we're very hawkish and not afraid to go to war with you. But I don't know how legitimate that idea is.
It is one of those things too. Whenever you're talking about this administration, is he like playing 4D chess or whatever? Or is he highly intelligent in these moves he's making, or is he just kind of falling backwards into things? Like how he kind of set up where he was defending Nancy Pelosi as not a racist, and then the very next day like throws the squad under the bus, and then the Democrats, who had been kind of distancing themselves from them, kind of have to come to their defense. And it's like, is he just the kind of guy who will talk shit to anybody because he doesn't care? Or was he actually like, hey, I'm going to make the Democrats defend these four
Right.
who seem to be kind of splitting the party up.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's intentional or accidental, but I think that putting the focus on the squad is an absolutely amazing move for Donald Trump and the Republican Party, because it makes the more radical elements of the Democratic Party seem like the main representation of them.
Yeah.
And if the moderate center, which is going to it's going to decide the election in this cycle, thinks that the left has just become crazy, and I think they have in a lot of ways, but pointing to them makes them seem even crazier.
Yeah.
Then Trump is going to win.
Yeah, and probably some Republicans too, because that's the thing. There's Democrats who definitely don't want to be associated with those four,
right,
based on the races they have to run, and now that that kind of stuff has happened.
Yeah.
So it is going to be, it'll be a fascinating election cycle to watch and see what happens, and see what Justin Amash does too.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what he's going to do, but that'll be fascinating. It is just kind of funny looking back on 2016 and remembering being told that, we can't have Gary in the debates because that would just be too many people. And here we've watched
20 people.
Yeah.
They had to break it up. Has that ever happened before? Have they ever had to break up the debates into two?
I don't believe so. I can't remember ever this many people running.
In 2016, people were saying, "Oh, the Republicans have way too many candidates on stage now."
Yeah, wasn't it like 9? I think.
Yeah.
That the Republicans had maybe 12.
I don't know.
I don't know.
But it's really interesting because all the pundits were pointing at how stratified the Republican Party and how disorganized it was compared to how organized it was under Obama. Then Obama leaves office, and the Democrats are even worse off than the Republicans were.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It really is. Yeah, it's fascinating kind of just seeing the way this has all gone down. And then for me, it's just like more evidence as to why I don't believe in any of in this system, and why I'm not a fan of any of it, because it's just it's insane. Because if you have somebody like Trump that can get elected, that's a weird system.
Yeah.
That's a weird system of a reality TV star.
Yeah, if there's any good that comes out of Trump, it's I'm hoping that he'll make it more normal for people out of politics to come in and run.
Yeah.
That's about the main good cultural thing I can think of. I think he's damaged the culture in a little bit of ways.
I agree. Yeah.
But if there's any good cultural impact, it's getting people out of politics into office again.
Yeah, and I think a part of that'll help, that kind of ties in with that as well, is it's made a lot of people interested in politics who maybe wouldn't have cared ever before, which I don't blame them for not wanting to, but now they're like, whoa, I should start paying attention more.
I guess one other good thing that could come out from a cultural perspective in terms of effect of the Donald Trump presidency is more of a resonance with candidates who appear more real. So I think good examples of this happening on the left are Andrew Yang and Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah.
Like they go on.
Marianne Williamson too, kind of to a degree, although a little too real probably, but she's definitely her real self.
She's got the cuckoo aspect down. I'm not sure about the real.
Yeah. No, I agree completely. I think that's why Tulsi and Yang are, at least by Google metrics, doing pretty damn good.
And it's crazy. I don't know if you're on Twitter or anything like that. The people calling Andrew Yang and Tulsi Gabbard's Russian.
Oh yeah.
Russian like spies. It's ridiculous.
Oh man, I got a bunch of people. I tweeted out something about Kamala Harris because she's a garbage person, and I said as much, and so I was just getting attacked by all these people, and they did this thing where they attack Ayn Rand, which is like, okay, I was a libertarian before I ever read any of Rand. Like, you're not gonna like get me by like, oh yeah, she died on Social Security and penniless. Like, okay, that's not. I don't base my libertarianism off of Ayn Rand. Like, that was much further along in my journey when I read her. She wasn't what brought me in. She did bring a lot of people in.
Even if she did bring you in, that's not not going to be like the foundation of your entire
Yeah.
philosophy.
Oh man.
Unless you're like 18.
Yeah, exactly. But it was just kind of funny scene, and then getting called a Russian bot, Trump supporter, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Which is just, it's been fascinating to see like that the idea that being anti-war is somehow like a Russian bot thing.
That used to be one thing the Democrats got right.
Oh my gosh, I remember the Bush years. They were so anti-war, and I thought they were going to come back with the Trump administration, but I think they just got to again. Obama's administration was a very violent situation. We were bombing 8-9 countries, and drone strikes all the time. So I think the anti-war left just kind of disappeared because Obama was the guy.
Right.
He was the first black president. Like all these amazing things as far as Democrats believed, and then he was continuing all these wars that he said he was going to stop and starting new ones. So I think they just kind of now consider pro-war a Democrat stance, I guess. I don't know how it happened, but
it's ridiculous. I really wonder why that is. Maybe just to throw something out in the air. I don't know if this is really the case, but maybe it's because they've become unprincipled on that stance and focused the fight to other issues that I think no one really cares about. All the social justice issues. It's just for one, the identity politics that's become the, I think, defining element of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I think that's super fair, and I think that's why we're seeing each of those debates. Well, I think part of why Tulsi was so searched after the second one is because she went after Kamala for her criminal justice record, which was awesome and needed to be touched on.
Yes.
But after the first one, I think it was definitely because of her anti-war. That was really the only thing that she got out there, and I think much in the same, which is weird because it's now like a very conservative, conservative, not neocon obviously, but conservative position for most on the right to wanting to end these wars, and culture's calling for these wars to be ended when she was one of the biggest trumpeters of the war in Iraq. So it is fascinating to just see that switch and how things change like that.
The Tulsi Gabbard Kamala Harris moment was great, but I also think it's indicative of what's so messed up with those debates is that everyone's just trying to get that one moment that's that zing moment that's gonna make it seem like you blew away everyone. And Kamala Harris, I agree with everything Tulsi Gabbard said, but Kamala Harris only got like 15 seconds to reply to that. There's a lot to unpack there, and she got 15 seconds to respond.
Yeah. And she didn't do herself any favors in those 15 seconds either.
That's true.
By standing by and not like saying like none of that's true or anything. Right. She just was like, I stand by my record. So it's like, you're not even countering in your 15 seconds.
She definitely took a hit after that.
Yeah, it's been, I think that'll pretty much spell the end of her campaign. Do you need another one?
No.
Okay, cool. So, yeah, that was a fascinating. But yeah, Yang is an interesting one too. Because it's kind of a social media thing.
Yeah,
it's how it started, and now it's taken off.
I think what it really was for both Yang and Gabbard was Joe Rogan. That was their first big exposure moment.
Yeah,
barely anyone knew about them until they did that. So I think every candidate needs to look a lot more closely at these long form platforms where they can have real discussions and really lay out their ideas. Bernie Sanders just recently went on Joe Rogan. I don't know if you felt the same way. I don't know if you watched
I did.
Bernie Sanders, Tulsi Gabbard, and Andrew Yang. I felt like out of the three, he was like the most. He didn't go deep enough.
I agree completely.
All the other candidates went really deep. Really showed their personalities, showed who they were as people, but Bernie Sanders still kind of had that kind of, how do you describe it? He had a barrier up. He was still acting like a politician. He didn't really show himself, I think.
I could see that for sure. He was kind of dodgy on gun confiscation and how he truly feels about that, because that's another big one that's coming out of the left right now by a lot of the candidates. So that's just kind of a I don't think it was the best, but it's definitely, I think, better than any view of him you've gotten on the debates.
I totally agree. Yeah, more candidates need to look at that platform to really talk to the people.
Yeah, because you're not going to get even the minute-long things. You don't really get to get. You can't get into stuff on that short of a time.
I really liked, by the way, how Andrew Yang appeared on the Ben Shapiro show.
Yep. Yeah. He was on. He went on Rubin too. He went on
I didn't see that one actually.
Yeah,
I have to watch that.
He went on the Rubin Report, and Buttigieg was supposed to, and then backed out. Vox wrote an article about Buttigieg was going to be going on an alt-right program. It's like, dude, Dave Rubin is not alt-right. He's a gay married man who used to identify as a liberal and now is kind of just more center and talks to people, has just long conversations with all kinds of different people.
That's so ridiculous. The left does such a bad job of policing each other when they have actually legitimate bad ideas. But they don't hesitate to attack each other when they step out of line. And out of line needs to be in quotation marks because it's something as simple as going on the Joe Rogan show or going on Dave Rubin. They suddenly become the enemy.
Yeah.
But then if you have AOC or Ilhan Omar spewing anti-Semitic rhetoric, or they're proposing like massive redistribution of wealth. None of the moderate left they're afraid to police them. No one calls them out. But the left never hesitates to attack anyone if they step out of line and violate social justice.
And it's crazy too because it's it's I think a very small percentage of the Democratic Party itself and the left in general. I think it's a very small percentage of people that fall into that camp, and then obviously an even smaller percentage of the actual population.
Extremely vocal small percentage.
Very vocal, and I think the Democrats
I think they've co-opted the left. They've taken it over.
Yeah.
They've been shifting it further and further left.
Well, I think the problem that Democrats are facing right now, and the party is facing right now, is they are playing into trends on social media as if that's indicative of what actual voters or even their own voters are feeling, and it's a horrible metric for measuring that. And so they're moving that far left because that's what's driving traffic in social media to them, and like that's what's resonating with people on social media. But again, like that's a tiny portion of the population that's on Twitter. An even tinier portion of that population that tweets most of the tweets. I think 10% of Twitter users account for 90% of the tweets that are on there, and yet that's what seems to be driving a lot of like where their policy is moving towards.
Yeah, it's crazy. Twitter is awful. It's a cesspool.
It is.
But by the way, everyone follow me at Keagan Wernicke.
Yeah.
I'm addicted to Twitter. I just recently started getting on the platform, so still building out a following.
Okay.
But it's representative on both sides of the most extremes.
Oh, by far. It's awful. It's also really good for breaking stuff.
Yeah.
Like, you see things so quickly. You have the ability to see, like, video. Like, I mean, there's this Hong Kong stuff going on.
Oh, yeah.
And you've got all these China bots tweeting out nonsense about how, the police are being peaceful and the protesters are just being violent. But then you can see these videos being posted, and you're like, no, that's crap. I can see what's going on.
Yeah, there's this Vice video, one of the only good things Vice has ever produced, that shows these thugs that the Chinese government has hired to go in and
the dudes in white, right?
Protesters, something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, these gangs just going in onto trains, just beating the crap out.
Yeah, I think they're triads.
Yeah, the triads.
Yeah.
The triads.
Yeah, they're hiring them, and now they're mobilizing the military right outside, which is just.
Yeah, I'm terrified for Hong Kong. It's the last bastion of freedom in that part of the world, and they're about to get their rights taken away from them. Yeah,
and it's going to be, it could turn into something incredibly violent.
Yeah.
Depending on how things go. Although I'm wondering if just the way in which the world is now will give any hesitation to China to not pull in like a Tiananmen Square type thing.
Mm-hmm. They do have a lot of eyes watching them right now, and they didn't have quite as many eyes during Tiananmen Square. So.
No, and then there was still stuff able to get out about that. So that's what's it's only easier to get that information out now.
Hopefully they'll be a lot more cautious, but I don't see China really backing down to the degree that the protesters are going to accept.
No, because this is and it's especially for a country like China that's kind of done this authoritarian style, but also flirting with some capitalist
Right.
ideas. This is the kind of thing that could spread quickly in the mainland.
Right.
And you're talking about a population of 1 billion. Like that's even with them being unarmed, it's still a pretty hard population size to control. It's a lot easier during Mao's China to execute 20 million people. You execute 20 million people now, and that's kind of like a drop in the bucket, to a large degree. So it will be fascinating because that is, when you give people that kind of economic freedom and have an area that's technically China but kind of free in a lot of ways, that stuff, you can't keep that contained.
Yeah.
Humans love the idea of freedom once they're exposed to it. Most of the time, there's some people that don't like the idea, I'm sure, but by and large, especially in a state like China, that's going to happen.
Yeah, the Mulan actress doesn't like the idea. Have you seen that going on Twitter?
I saw something about
people are wanting to boycott Mulan because the headline actress is supporting the Chinese government in this scenario.
Oh, I heard it was. I heard it was the other way around, that they were wanting to boycott Mulan because she came out in support of Hong Kong.
Oh no! It's
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Oh,
she's supporting the communist state of China.
Oy.
Or communist isn't the best word to describe them anymore. The authoritarian state of China.
Yeah, that's not a good look.
Oh no, it's not.
That is not a good look. It's fascinating too. Saw a really good meme, and you've seen all the like American flags in Hong Kong and like and all that.
They're the real Antifa, by the way.
Yeah, yeah, and I think I'm sure you've seen it too, where it's like "Be the America Hong Kong thinks you are."
Yeah, I tweeted that out.
Yeah,
put it on my Instagram story because I just loved that so much.
It was great, yeah, and it is by and large like exactly. It's fascinating to see that, and then like what went on in Portland this weekend, and people are being assaulted and having American flags ripped out of their hands, as if those are symbols of fascism, and it's just a really weird dichotomy going on at the moment. Antifa is garbage. I mean, I'm not a fan of the Proud Boys either. I think both of them are dumb. They're both antagonistic of each other.
Why is Portland the battleground right now for the two awful extreme ideologies?
I have no idea how it became like. What is it about Portland? I think because Antifa came up there in a strong way, and like there's the videos of them like just shutting down streets and like directing traffic for whatever reason. Which is again why I tend to have a bigger problem with Antifa than the Proud Boys, because the Proud Boys just by and large to me tend to be kind of like assholes and idiots who like to antagonize but aren't necessarily violent or instigating it, I guess. Whereas Antifa seems to be violence is their first go-to.
At least in this situation, the Portland situation, Antifa's definitely the more violent one.
Yeah, specifically in Portland.
Right.
Well, because I think that's kind of why the Proud Boys maybe have come in and started doing more, because I think there was the violence even before right-wing groups were doing anything there in Portland. I think they were just... Antifa was upset with how the city was being run and was... I think they've just... For whatever reason, they've got a really good stronghold in Portland. The mayor seems to be like at least... I don't know, sympathetic. Yeah. To what they're doing and allowing that to go on, and kind of keeping the police from really getting too involved. And it's just, it's dumb, and it's just like both sides. I'm like, you just like petulant children that want attention is what it's what it seems like.
Yeah.
Like the Proud Boys want to, say whatever it is that they're saying, and spout their ideology and videotape themselves walking down the street for attention, and then Antifa wants to come in and fight them for attention. It's just like, it's dumb in a lot of ways and very annoying, and like a little bit scary too. Like, did you see some of the videos from this weekend?
Oh yeah.
You got the loudspeakers going like the whole time. They're giving police instructions, like almost like a military state type thing, emergency type situation where martial law's in effect. It wasn't, but it kind of had that feeling with like just what you see in like dystopian movies.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. It definitely looked very dystopian.
Yeah, so it's just weird. weird that it's Portland.
Yeah.
Portland doesn't seem like a hotbed.
The funniest thing on Twitter right now is a lot of people on the left are comparing Antifa to World War II veterans.
Oh my God.
It's just laughable. You're telling me the people in unicorn costumes dancing around, they're comparable to the World War II vets.
Right? And well, then that's the problem too, especially with a group like Antifa. It's like, if anybody to the right of them is considered a fascist or a Nazi or, what have you, that's a good majority of the population.
Oh, yeah.
And it really, takes away the power of that word or what it actually means.
Yeah.
And you're not, it's this delusion of grandeur. Like, you're not fighting Nazis. You're going at it with the Proud Boys.
What you're doing is you're making your party look awful.
Yes.
And giving it a higher chance of losing the next election cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just they're a weird. Yeah, they're a weird group. I cannot quite figure out what exactly it is that their goal is either. What it is that they want to see. Antifa, anyway.
Well, I think anyone who joins the Proud Boys or succumbs to white nationalism or joins Antifa, they suffer from a lot of delusions, and they think that they can radically transform the system by going into a group of, now here's the proper use of this term, deplorables.
Yeah.
When really they're just making the side of the political spectrum that they align with more look terrible.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then, obviously, and it's kind of, again, as I tend to do, I critique the state in most things, and the state isn't, again, I don't believe this is their job anyway, so it doesn't really surprise me one way or another, but they're not doing a good job of handling the situation. The whole thing in Charlottesville, the violence exploded because they took those were they straight up neo-Nazis in Charlottesville, right? That was the Tiki Torch?
I think they were white nationalists.
Okay, they were white nationalists. They took them out into where Antifa was. That's the route that they took them out, and then the violence explodes. It's
right.
At the very least, you should want to. And it seemed like that's something that they tried to do yesterday. I saw at one point that they were the Antifa, they had them under a bridge, and the Proud Boy guys were in the grass, and they were trying to keep them separated, which is probably a good idea. But it's just when that kind of stuff is happening, and it really
whenever you get crowds in general, this is a big psychological aspect of the human mind. Most people within the crowd, the vast majority, will basically, they'll have the most radical element within that crowd imprinted onto their behavior. So most of the people in those crowds, probably on both sides, would never do what they're doing alone.
Yeah.
But whenever they're in that crowd, the most radical person stands out, and everyone within the crowd adopts their behavior. They basically lose their mind. That's really what it is.
Groupthink.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is, and it's it's just it's crazy.
It makes those demonstrations very dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially and that's kind of the weird thing too about this and about Antifa and kind of that section of the left is they seem to be intent on provoking and kind of poking at this element of the right that is historically and traditionally and right now tends to be very well armed and not adverse to having used guns before, knowing how to shoot, all this kind of stuff. And so it's like you're kind of trying to antagonize a group into violence that could be very ugly for you if you antagonize them into that sort of violence.
Yeah, that's one thing that possibly makes the Proud Boys and the white nationalists potentially more dangerous than Antifa in the long run.
Yeah.
Because they do have that aspect of being trained in using those weapons, whereas Antifa, most of them are probably scared of the sight of a gun.
Exactly. And it's not as even if there's some crazy awesome paramilitary unit or even a militia in any way. It's just I guess that most of them have fired a gun before.
Yes.
And so it is. It's just it seems like it's a bad idea to kind of keep trying to provoke that element of the right into violent confrontations.
Right. Yeah. By training, I meant just having some informal experience.
Yeah. No, I knew what you meant. I just wanted to.
Right.
We're not promoting
for sure
paramilitary units or militias on here, they're also they're white nationalists, so I'm not.
We're definitely not promoting them at all.
Well, no, just like I don't think they're.
We're not saying that they are.
Yeah, because they're not the brightest group either. So I'm not saying that they're going to be able to do a whole lot. But in this specific case, you'd be going up against a group that's largely unarmed.
Exactly.
It's a weird one. I don't know what that looks like as it moves forward, and what Portland looks like moving forward. I mean, that would be annoying as all get out. If that, I couldn't foresee it happening anywhere in Texas.
Yeah.
Again, just kind of
right.
as a lot of people carry all the time.
Yeah.
It's just I would be annoyed if that was going down in downtown Austin.
That'd be awful.
Almost monthly, it seems like that it's going on in.
Oh man, is
Portland?
that how frequent it is over there now?
Maybe. I guess none of it happened in July. The Andy No thing happened in late June.
Yeah.
And then we got another one, and so I don't know how frequently it seems to be frequent enough.
Yeah.
It's where it would be annoying as all get out if you're just trying to live a normal life in the city of Portland. But I don't know. That's where my uber libertarian kicks in and go, this is why everything should be privatized, because then they wouldn't be able to, they'd only be able to meet on a land where they're allowed to, and then you wouldn't have the ability of both groups to be in the same area antagonizing each other, because I'm assuming whoever would let one group on their land wouldn't let the other.
It's an interesting argument for privatization of property. I haven't heard that particular argument before.
Yeah. It's it's kind of the same thing with riots and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
If there's not public areas where people can gather and things can get out of hand, if it were to all be private land, then that allows for that kind of stuff to not occur so easily. It's just kind of an interesting. It's one that I've come across as I've listened to people who have talked about this kind of stuff specifically, because whenever you get into anarchism, people are like, oh, it'll just be riots in the street. And I'm like, well, no, if everything's private, then it's not going to be quite like that, because they're not going to allow people to organize in that way on their land.
Right.
So it's just an interesting one. But cool. So what else do we got going on? How's the marketing agency? How's that working with Google and then doing your nonprofit thing? Is that a...
Well, it doesn't really intersect much.
Yeah. I imagine.
Just using their ad platforms, really.
Okay.
There are some interesting things that go on within the ad space that might intersect just from an ideological perspective. Certain ads do get censored for certain companies, and we can have a discussion about that within the Freedom and Tech Alliance. But in terms of my day-to-day, I mean, there's no real intersection.
Didn't that happen with Tulsi? Isn't she suing Google because of ad stuff?
So. Yeah. They took down some of her ads
right after the debate, right?
Yeah.
When it would have been most useful. That's so. Is it similar to the way Twitter or YouTube does stuff, where do you get strikes with Google? Do they tell you that they took it down? What does that look like?
Yeah, you'll get notified.
Okay.
You get an email from them. They say you're in violation of your policies, and you can. There's an appeals process. As well.
Okay.
But yeah, if you violate it enough, they can suddenly take your account down.
Okay. And what counts as a violation, or what technically, because there's technically what's a violation, and then how they choose to enforce it tend to be very different.
There's a lot of things that are in violation of their terms of service. Some of them can be as simple as improper capitalization.
Really?
Yeah, there's actually a business reason for that, so I don't really have an issue.
Yeah. That's just an issue. Yeah, I wouldn't have thought of that.
Yeah. But if you get enough ads taken down, and they don't disclose exactly what that number is, and some violations have more weight than others, you can have your account suspended.
Interesting.
And the appeals process, thankfully this has not happened to any of my clients while they were under my management, but it has happened to some of my clients while they were under another agency's management. So from what I've heard, it's a pain in the ass to resolve.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Because I've seen how difficult it can be with just like a Twitter one.
Oh, it sucks on a business perspective too. Imagine 10%, 15, 20, it depends on your company, percent of your revenue just disappearing overnight, sometimes even higher.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
So when you're using the marketing in Google Ads, are those ads that are being placed on websites that folks are browsing? Is it making it so that your company comes up first in the algorithm during the search? Like, what does that look like?
Google Ads does have display advertising, which do go on sites that you're browsing.
Okay.
Like this actual like sidebar ads,
Yeah,
images, or text. But the primary use of Google Ads platform is all through search.
Okay.
So you search a term, let's say buy flooring, and
Okay.
then most of what you see at the top is going to be ads.
Okay. Yeah.
So-
I have noticed that because they'll say too that it's an ad.
Yeah. And they also syndicate to other search platforms as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So like, did they do that with DuckDuckGo as well? Okay,
I don't
yeah.
think they do. I mean,
Yeah,
it would be kind of odd if they did do
Yeah.
the big privacy.
Kind of,
focus.
yeah, because it doesn't fit
Yeah.
with what they do. But like, I'm assuming like Bing and
Yeah.
does Yahoo still have a search?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, Bing, Yahoo, but most of the ROI you get is directly from the Google Ads platform.
I imagine so.
Yeah,
Since
most of the volume happens there too. So
yeah, it is called Google it for a reason, I suppose.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. It has been one of those things where I'm just like, I know that my little not using their stuff isn't
Right.
really going to make a difference, but I feel a lot better. Like I use Brave as my browser. And
I mean, it's certainly a good way to protect your data, and
Yeah.
there are some reasonable concerns you can have around these companies amassing your data. Google can turn over your data to the police if you're in proximity of a crime.
That's the thing, yeah. Because for me, I'm like, I don't mind when a company has my data, because I know what their game
Yeah.
is. I know what they're trying. They're trying to get me to buy stuff. They're trying to make me a consumer. So I don't have a problem with that. It's that idea of like they could then give that information to the government, if they choose to cooperate, and that scares me more than anything.
Yeah, I mean, there's a risk even given it to these companies.
I know.
Let's
Yeah.
say Google decides they don't like FIDA, and then they dox me by leaking out all of my Google Drive and all of my photos.
Yeah, that would be
That would be shooting themselves in the foot, though. So I don't think that's really much of a real risk. But it's at least it's an idea you can entertain.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is one of those where, yeah, it's such a different thing when you're dealing with how much of the data they're able to get. And again, it's like it's a trade-off. You're using
Right.
their stuff for free, by and large.
Yeah.
So it is. There's that trade-off, but it's like, yeah, I mean, there are times where I'm like, man, what if I just go get a cabin out in Montana and just check out?
Yeah.
Like, if I could somehow just have like broadband internet there.
Until the government decides they want to build a wall over your farm and they take your farm by eminent domain.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah, that's a whole other... And that's one of the most frustrating things, too, about Trump's wall. Is that they just seem to be okay with eminent domain.
That's the biggest reason I'm against it.
Yeah.
The eminent domain aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not your right to do that. And it's just... Yeah, I don't know. That's going to be a very interesting to see how that plays out in the election as well, because that's another one where, like, I like the idea of open borders, but I'm also pragmatic and realistic.
Right.
Like, I also think that probably, first of all, I wouldn't want the government to disappear overnight,
Right.
because that would not be good either.
Chaotic.
Yeah, it would not be good. As hopefully, if we move towards that direction, the borders would probably be one of like the last things to go, and then have truly free movement when there's not like welfare or taxes or stuff being stolen. So. But I also recognize, like, I don't believe that the Democrats feel that way, at least not the elected ones.
Right.
A lot of the people who believe in it, who are just normal voters, I think, believe in it for the same reasons I do.
Right.
But I think the Democrats party and their elite just view them as votes.
Yeah. My stance on government is I'm a minarchist, not an anarchist. I think we need some degree of government. Because, I mean, see what happens when you have a power vacuum.
Oh, yeah.
Syria, ISIS.
Yep. Libya.
Exactly.
Somalia. Although Somalia had a nice little 3-year stretch of like there was no single power that was able to take over, so they kind of had like the whole quote unquote Ancapistan thing for like a minute, and they were doing all right, and then the United States decided to support one of the tribes in there. That's how it goes.
So I think you do need some kind of government with enough power to prevent someone from taking over the country. I mean, with our power vacuum, who do we have taking control over the country? Is it Google?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's that would be that'd be an interesting thing. And again, why it's not like this is what I want to happen immediately. It's more of like the destination. I liken it to a train. Like I want the train to be heading towards anarchy and not towards authoritarianism. And then whatever that looks like for you, wherever you want to get off. But I would just hope that people would want to be heading towards freedom.
What we need is a populace that once again values liberty and freedom.
That would be nice.
And that's the kind of environment that a democratic republic can maintain its health in. Once you start to degrade those values, once you start to value handouts more than liberty and the surveillance state more than liberty, then you lose your freedom.
Yeah,
and it tends to go to one extreme. It tends to start to move to one extreme, either too much government or no government. And I'd rather be on the end of closer to no government.
Exactly, and I think it's a lot easier to move the other direction when you're towards no government.
Right.
Once you get towards authoritarian, like the more rights they're not giving those back willingly. Any rights that you hand over, so it becomes
it's a lot easier to add to the government than take away from it.
Exactly.
Our government's become extremely bloated because of it.
I think it's the largest in the history of the world. And 4 trillion. I can't. I think back to what our founding fathers started, and I can't imagine that they would have guessed that the government would come to this. And that we'd be this kind of empire. I'm sure they'd be very disappointed with what went on. So, so it's it'll be fascinating to watch, and it'll be interesting to kind of just see where things move politically, and who once our generation starts actually voting, I think that could be interesting as well. I think a lot of people in our age group don't necessarily. They may tend to vote for one party over the other, but I don't think there's that same party identification that like our parents' generation has tended to have, where like that's a defining characteristic of themselves.
Yeah, I've been flirting with this new idea recently, in that I don't think the goal is to get everyone to vote, but to get more people educated. Because I think when uneducated people vote, it's not good for democracy. We want to encourage more education through the populace and then get those people to vote, but I don't think it should be blanket getting everyone to vote.
And like actually focusing on civics and teaching people civics.
Is
something that we've lost, I think. And it is kind of one of those things where I'm like, I mean, the whole idea of democracy is just kind of like, 51% gets to call the shots for the other 49. Like, I mean, I guess I could see why people think it's valid, and it's probably the best current system if we're talking about a state that exists.
It's not perfect,
but
by any means.
Not at all. And it's it really is kind of one of those things where I think probably what's going to be best for the United States is a breakup in some degree, because I just don't see how it can keep going the way it's going. When you just got two sides that see things so drastically different.
Right. The question is, how do you get that to happen without chaos?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think it could, but I think it's folks need to start making that move beforehand, before like really violent stuff starts erupting.
Right.
Because then that can spiral out of control quickly. If that's the way it's going. But if you're able to do like I don't know what it would look like either, but it just seems like that's probably the best solution to kind of the things that we're facing now. And then you kind of have the idea people can vote with their feet. You know, if you're not liking, the the way in which your section of the break off of the country is operating. You can move, to one of the other ones. But I just don't see how we could continue on with how far the two sides seem to be moving, and pulling. Both of the parties are kind of getting pulled in those directions in general, and it's just doesn't seem like anybody, either party, is going to do anything about the debt. And so that's the whole thing too. Like, that's eventually 22 trillion. Like, what happens if it reaches 30? Like, it can't just keep going. Yeah. Something's gonna come. Reckoning's gonna come, and that'll be that'll be a rough one. Talk about another Great Depression type thing. Yeah. So we'll see what happens there too. Awesome. So we're right about an hour. Is there anything else that you wanted to plug or get into while we're talking here?
Yeah. Well, I think this is a good stopping point. Thanks so much for inviting me on, Eric. We had a pretty wide-ranging conversation here, and we didn't really dive too much into what FIDA is about. But I invite all of you to come take a look at our website at freedomintech.com. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Our handle on all platforms is just @freedomintech. And if you want to learn a little bit more about what we do, we have our own podcast as well, which Eric was actually one of our guests on. And that's the great idea to really get a sense of the issues and everything we stand for. But yeah, thanks again so much for having me on, Eric.
Yeah, absolutely. Any upcoming events here in the Austin area for FIDA?
We're going to be at YALCON in
awesome.
September
Okay.
7th.
Yeah.
So please come visit us there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be there as well, so if you see me, make sure to say hi.
Perfect.
Looking forward to that. Yeah, YALCON will be fun. So thanks so much for coming out again. I really do appreciate it. Love what y'all are doing.
Thank you.
And this was a good conversation. We'll probably have you on again at some point.
Perfect. Thanks, Eric.
All right, thanks.